Hi everyone, you're all welcome. My name is Oğuzhan and I'm so thrilled to be hosted in this international community meeting for the first time. For beginning, I would like to share a little our story. I have been practicing Aikido for 25 years, and for the 15 years, I run a website called Boş Ayna, Empty Mirror. I'm sorry. Website name is Empty Mirror. Empty Mirror is an online magazine that publishes articles on spiritual teachings, especially Aikido and meditation. I featured my own articles and also as well as translation of works by masters like my sensei. I started following my sensei when I was studying on Aikido and meditation together. At one point, I joined my sensei community calls, and I thought that why don't we do something like this in here? So my sensei became the inspiration of the Empty Mirrors community meetings. That's why I want to talk with him about it. Then the first time we have an international guest, and I hope it will be continue like this. My sensei,
It's
you're
my pleasure.
welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Sensei, as I started, could you tell us a little about your story? How did you start practicing Aikido and how did meditation come into your life? I know it's not a short story, but can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I mean, I'm doing Aikido I started in 85, so I guess it's like 40, almost 40 years now. And like many young boys from my generation and maybe a few generations after, I had, comic book fantasies of martial arts that were mostly inspired by Bruce Lee, to be honest, at the very beginning. So as a young kid, I did some karate, I did some kung fu, I did some taekwondo, I did some judo, and also I did a lot of sports. So I was playing American football, American baseball, also soccer or football, and I was always doing something. And but I really, really loved the martial arts, and I think I love the martial arts the most. Well, not just the martial arts, but sports, because I think I found my deepest authenticity. I just drop into some flow state of play where you're not even thinking about technique or method. You're just there in the moment and excelling at that sport or martial art. And I knew that that's what I was looking for. And the reason I was inspired by that is because when I was 3 years old, I did have some type of spiritual experience. Sitting on the front porch of my house
Mhm.
in a suburb of Dallas, Texas, and I was playing with a little toy, something like this, like from Disney, a Goofy, the dog Goofy,
Mhm.
and I was just there and I was playing with it in the middle of the summer, and suddenly I had this experience of I didn't know what it was, of course, at the time. I was only 3 years old, but it was what you could call as a a spiritual shift. These days, I would put words on it like non-conceptual reality or non-dual awareness. But whatever the case it was, it lasted for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe. It was gone, but I never forgot it. I
Mhm.
never forgot it. And it's not like I was trying to find it again. I didn't even, my family was atheist. I didn't have any spiritual or religious education, zero. So I didn't, I didn't even think of anything, but it did stay as a reference for me. And I would find myself touching that same experience in sports and martial arts. So, and Bruce Lee had this he was a martial artist, like amazing fighter, but he also had a deep spiritual practice himself. And he spoke about it, he thought about it. And then probably when I was around 12 or 13 years old, I saw a picture of O Sensei from Aikido. And I knew that that was the two were coming together. The totally spiritual was coming together with the totally martial. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. It took me some years before I could do it. I started Aikido when I was 22.
Mhm.
There was not a lot of dojos around Dallas. There was one on the south side of town. I lived on the north side of town. So by the time I was 22, I had a pretty good job and I had a car I could go. And so I started training and I never stopped. I just knew that I found my path. And after 3 years, I got my black belt. I think it was the quickest person to get his black belt in that dojo ever, but I was there every day. I was training 5 days a week. And I got my black belt in 3 years. And I knew that I wanted to go to Japan, and I just went to Japan. First, I went for a summer vacation, 2 months. And I just by some fate, I ended up in the Iwama Dojo with Saito Sensei. And I loved it. I was there in the summertime, and they have a special training camps in the summer for two
Yeah.
months. And we were training 5 classes a day with 1 or 2 days off, and then another 5 classes a day, like for a week training, 2 days off, week training. And I did that for 2 months, and I was just in heaven. I was 25 years old, and it was just I fell in love with it in Japan. Very high level of training, and so I moved back. After the vacation, I went back to the States, and I knew that I was just going to move back. After about 10 months, saved up my money for 10 months, and then took off, moved back to Japan to be Uchidashi with Saito Sensei for 1 year. And then I found some work teaching English, and I was able to stay. And I moved out of the dojo. I had a small house close to the dojo, and I stayed for another 7 years. So total 8 years. And it's interesting because Aikido has a spiritual dimension to it. And I knew that I love the martial Aikido, but I was also interested in the spiritual. I wanted both. But what I was really seeking was to come back into contact with that spiritual awakening, that spiritual state, whatever it is, because that state has a particular taste to it. In that state, I would say any type of spiritual awakening, there's a sense of perfection.
Yeah, sensei.
Not like I'm perfect, like I'm doing it. Not that. That's not what I mean. It's just there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. It's perfect. You're in the right place, in the right time, in the right way. There's nothing to add to the experience. There's nothing to take away from it. It's just because the sense of self is gone or relaxed or faded away. And I had been seeking that in Aikido. I'd been seeking that in martial arts. But the beautiful thing about being in Japan for 8 years, training with the Japanese masters, many of them students of O Sensei, they would give a lot of lip service. Lip service.
Hmm.
Yeah, they would talk a lot about Aikido spirituality. Some of them wouldn't.
Yeah.
Saito Sensei didn't talk much about Aikido spirituality. Um, Many teachers did. They would give lip service to it, but they didn't express it. It
Mm.
wasn't in, they didn't do it. Like O Sensei, you just saw O Sensei and he was expressing it. He was living it. And I realized that what I was really looking for, I mean, I was getting good in Aikido. I was really getting, I went there at 25 and I just was strong and I was training 20 hours a week for 8 years. You get good. So I moved up the hierarchy, but I realized that I wasn't getting any closer to the spiritual
Mm.
realization, the spiritual awakening. And the people around me, not just in Iwama, also in Tokyo, also around Japan where I went, neither were they. And it's not a judgment. It's not a judgment. It's just a discernment. It's like, okay, that's good because most of them have really good Aikido, and I love training with them, and I love to learn that, and I always improved. But I realized that I was looking for a direct path to some type of spiritual realization and methodologies and contexts and teachings where they say this. The
Mm.
Buddhist first teaching is it's a spiritual teaching. Every religious tradition at its mystical core, its teaching is about spirit, absolute. It could be about God, communion with God. It could be about emptiness, like in Buddhism. It could be about non-duality. But they all have methodologies, contexts, teachings, and communities that are practicing towards that. And the Aikido community was partially, but not completely. Because
Yeah.
the Aikido community, actually, I've taught a lot in Turkey. It's been a long time since I was there, but Turkey's the same as Israel, as Europe, as as in the West Bank. I ran a program teaching Aikido in the West Bank with Palestinians. Same there, same in Japan. That
Mm.
human beings grab onto the physical, the material, and we want to get better, faster, stronger in the material, but it doesn't take us any closer to spiritual.
Mhm.
To get to the spiritual, we have to somehow have processes, intentions, and guides to help us release the material so the spiritual can arise. And I'd kind of reached a very high level in Japan, but I wasn't getting closer to spirit. So after 8 years, it was time for me to leave Japan. I felt that my time was up. And instead of going back to America, I always thought I'd go back to America. I ended up going to Burma to practice meditation. I'd been practicing meditation on my own for about 3 years and without a teacher. And some of the books that I was reading, Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, they talked about a teacher in Burma that they both trained with, a man named Sayadaw U Pandita. That's him there, Sayadaw U Pandita. He was in Burma, as Saito Sensei. Yeah.
Yes, sensei.
Yeah. He was in I saw yours too, Osan. You have a picture of Osensei and a picture of Goenkaji.
Yes, sensei.
I
It's
saw that's nice.
my little Kamiza in my home.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Well, that's the whole thing. It brings the two together. And so I went to Burma to practice. I thought I'd just practice 1 or 2 weeks, become enlightened, and then I'd be done. But it didn't work that way. I ended up going back to Burma and doing retreats every year for 8 years. I spent a total of 3 years on silent meditation retreats before I was kind of satisfied with what they were teaching. And then I really understood what spiritual transmission, spiritual methodology, spiritual teaching, spiritual practice was all about. And the whole time I was doing that, I'd go on every winter I'd go on retreat for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. One time I went for 10 months. And in between my retreats, I would tour around Europe teaching Aikido to earn some money. So I'd go back on retreat.
Mm.
So I was doing the spiritual practice and the Aikido practice simultaneously. And for the longest time, and this is the last thing I'll say because I don't want to talk too much, the longest time, my Aikido path and my meditation path were parallel. And then slowly, 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 they started to come together and weave together as one practice, as one path of practice. So
Yeah,
that's my history.
yeah, it's a very good story, sensei. What is meditation from your point of view? Basically, how can you define it? I mean, for example, in especially in Aikido practice, we're talking about mindfulness and we're talking about observing our bodies or observing our moves. I think there's a very basic concept of meditation,
Yeah,
observing
sure.
the breathing and movement.
Hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
actually, I am asking about the meditation practice in Aikido practice.
Okay.
What kind of
Uh,
practice we talking about?
okay. Very interesting territory. So I want to tell a little story. Okay. There is a story of a frog. Yeah.
Yeah.
A frog. And he's sitting next to a river. He's on the bank of the river and the water's going by him. And he sees two fish. They swim by. And the frog says to the fish, he says, "Hey, how's the water?" And one fish looks at the other fish, says, "What's water? What's he talking about?" They had no idea what he meant because they were so in water and water was so in them that there was no separation. They didn't know what he meant. How's water? It's like saying to a caveman, "How's the atmosphere?" What are you talking about? Atmosphere. What do you mean? So the fish didn't get it. So that perspective is kind of a non-dual perspective. There's a spiritual awakening. There's two general types of spiritual awakenings, and then we'll get to meditation, and then we'll get to Aikido.
Mhm.
There's two general types of awakenings. Okay, there's more. There's like five, but I want to talk about two. There's love, there's absolute love, and there's absolute perfection, all these things. But the two I want to speak about is a non-dual awakening and a non-self awakening. And a non-dual awakening is when the subject-object duality, self-other, subject-object, collapse into oneness. And it's just a field of oneness, and the identity is the field of oneness. There's nothing separate from that field of oneness. That's called a non-dual awakening, non-dual realization. A non-self realization is when the sense of self dissolves, and it's a profound experience of emptiness. There's no
Mm.
sense of self there. This realization, both of these two realizations are valid. One equals the spiritual formula either equals one, sorry, one over here, or the spiritual formula equals zero. If you take, like in Vipassana meditation, the type of meditation that I do, the type of meditation that you practice, Osan,
Yes, yes,
with Goenka style, we create the observer. We're using mindfulness, basically. And what does mindfulness do? Mindfulness, part of the mind can differentiate from the experience and observe the experience. So there's the mind that observes, and there's the experience that is observed. So there's an observer. You said it yourself in Aikido. We're teaching the students how to observe. Usually in Aikido, what do you observe first? Kind of center. Here comes an attack. Here comes another person. They're going to grab me or strike me. The fear comes up. Okay, no way, hang on. Fear. Okay. So just give some awareness to the fear, watch it drop, and then drop back into your center. That centering exercise is an observation exercise. If you don't have the capacity to observe yourself, you can't do centering. You can't do centering. You've got to create the capacity to observe yourself to do centering. So this is one methodology. The observer or the witness is the mindfulness way that leads you down a path of practice, and that's what we're doing in Vipassana and many other types of meditation. It's a dualistic method, a dualistic technique that leads to everything that you observe when you can differentiate from and observe something, you're no longer identified with it. There's no identity. The identity is, let's say I was angry. I get angry. If I can observe the anger, then I'm not the anger anymore. The anger is part, it's in me, but it's an object in me. And then when my meditation gets good, it dissolves rather quickly. It's pretty kind of advanced, but things dissolve rather quickly. Everything you can take as an object, it's impermanent and it dissolves. Everything, including the self. And
yeah,
when you take everything away, including the sense of self, all thoughts, all feelings, all notions, all identities, it's all dissolving. You drop into progressively deeper states of emptiness. That's what we're doing in Vipassana. It's a very helpful method in Aikido. We're using it, even though we may not say it's like meditation, we are using it in Aikido.
mm,
That's one methodology. The other methodology, which is more Zen, more non-dual, like all the Advaita Vedanta, the Hindu schools and some of the New Age schools and Zen Buddhism, they use where you're not taking of course, they might have techniques where they do this, but it's not the ultimate practice. The ultimate practice is that you're not observing objects, but they say stepping back, where the sense of the sense of observer dissolves and you're identified with awareness itself. And there's no separate observer in that state. And that leads to a non-dual awakening. The fish in the river, the frog can see objects. Yeah, so they're different perspectives. If you have a coin, a spiritual coin, one side of the coin is absolute oneness. The other side of the coin is absolute zero, emptiness. So again, it's a zero, it's a binary thing, a zero or one. Those two together are the yin and the yang. Then you
mm.
have a complete spiritual perspective. Now, what you and I are doing in our Vipassana meditation, not that we're always doing it, but the main method doesn't matter, even though we practice different schools, the method is different, but it's all Vipassana.
Yes, Sensei.
Method of mindfulness, the awareness gets differentiated and you observe experience. So there's an observer and observed. There's a witness, there's the mindfulness, and the object you're being mindful of. That wasn't O Sensei's practice. O Sensei was doing more of a non-dual practice, and his awakening in Aikido was a non-dual awakening. And sometimes I think there's also a little bit of confusion in Aikido, and this is something I did discover in Japan, that if you just practice Aikido a little bit more, it will lead you down the spiritual path to awakening, but then nobody says how.
Yeah.
So the thing with non-dual awakening, it's not about something in the future. It's always here and now. It's always here and now. And it's all you can do is set up the conditions, relax, open up, center ground, connect, and then let the energy flow through. And when the conditions are right, you'll drop into a flow state. And the quality of the flow state is that it's effortless. Think of
Mhm.
we're all doing Aikido here, or we've all done Aikido at some point in the past. If you're not practicing today, think of how much time we spend in Aikido making effort. The technique, this, or they're pushing me. Okay, it's not a problem. It's fine. You go to the gym, you make effort. It's not a problem. But how many times in Aikido, and I'm sure many of us here, I'm guessing many of us here have also experienced doing Aikido effortlessly. It's just happening. The energy comes, you blend with it. It's all flowing because there's a collapsing of the duality, and it's just the two energies click together, and it just spontaneously resolves in a creative expression and creative in a creative emergence. This is kind of what O Sensei was doing, and that's a non-dual. And
Mhm.
again, it's a flow state. It's effortless. It's timeless. You're not thinking about what's going to be next. What did he say? What did the teacher say? What am I going to do? I got to put them down. That's past, present, future. None of that. This is gone. You're just in the moment. It's effortless. It's timeless. And the reason it's effortless, the reason it's timeless, the reason you're just in the moment is because it's selfless. There's no sense of self. So this is more of a non-dual experience in Aikido.
Mhm.
And so I guess in the way like the training that I do, we do some, we do quite a bit of technical training, which is really about the material, kind of the nuts and bolts, angles, positions, the smoothest way to do the technique, how to receive, all that stuff. Then we do observation training to where we can kind of develop our center, reorganize our nervous system, stay in the present moment. That would be the more mindfulness practice. And then we do the flow state practice, which is, you set it up. It's not like we're going to do, okay, let's do Ikkyo, Omote, and Ura. No, 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 no. I mean, that's good. We should do that. That's part of the training. But in the flow state training, we just set up the conditions. Okay, let's just do a few yokomens, and I'm just going to practice my center and just move with the energy as it comes in. And then you start to feel. And it's all about relating to the partner in the moment. Because if I do a Yokomenuchi Shihonage, like in the textbook,
Mhm.
on you, okay, that's one thing, but I do it on the next person, it's another thing. Every situation will be different. So if I just let go of doing that technique and stay open and just meet the situation for where it's at, then my body automatically blends into, aligns with an awases with the attack to a spontaneous resolution. So that's another type of training. So I said a lot. So there's a technical training. It's good. We need that. It's very material. It's okay. It's good. We need that. First cue, we go from fifth cue to fourth cue to third cue. That's important training. Yeah, not most schools do that, but not every school. But still, that's important training. Then we have our awareness training, our mindfulness training, which can be done. It's kind of nice to do it with the weapons because it's really clear and sharp. But then we have the flow state, which is the non-dual training. So these are kind of the the two ways that I bring the meditation into my Aikido practice.
If I understand right, you talk about something O sensei called it, or other senseis called it, Takemusu Aiki. Yeah, sensei.
That's right.
There's no technique, there's no form in it. Just
That's right.
you feel the situation and you just move with it. And it's make me think like there's a very strong connection between our body and our mind. Actually, when I practice an Aikido technique, actually I'm practicing an idea with my body. I'm moving, I'm doing some technique,
That's
but
right.
also all the techniques has some principles, some ideas, and that's
That's right.
maybe the missing part is we never talk about these ideas inside. What inside in the techniques? Maybe can we talk about a little bit how this connection works, how your movement
Perfect.
affects your mind, how your body
Yes.
change your mind.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I'd love to. So, if we only practice Aikido technically, like if our school is oriented towards technique, many schools, in fact, I would say most schools are oriented towards primarily oriented towards technique. There are some teachers, there are some schools that are just they're organized around the principles. And my experience, the schools that organize around the principles, their techniques are a little less sharp. Schools that organize around techniques, their techniques are more sharp, but their principles are a little not so clear. So okay, they're different ones. Um, but like you said, even inside the physical techniques, the principles are there for them to, when we learn to really be functional, like in an Awase point of view, with Aikido, we're practicing to be centered, we're practicing to be grounded, we're practicing good posture, and we're practicing good extension, whatever way we're doing it. Bam, bam, good extension, good posture, good center, good ground. Then from there, good connection. So when I have all those things in alignment and my partner has all those things in alignment, it's not a beginner's skill, but it takes a little bit of time. And then we click, then something starts to flow through us. When they're in alignment with me, something starts to flow through us. What flows through us? The principles become alive. The principles wake up. When my partner has it, the principles wake up in them. When we both connect through that, then the principles flow through both of us. And like you said, a couple of things. One of the dangers of practicing of a heavy technique orientation. When we have a technique orientation, we like good Japanese students, we sit in a line. Our teacher stands in front of the class, or you stand in front of the class, I stand in front of the class, and we show techniques that we knew from the past. Look, I've got this technique. I'm going to show you how to do it now. I show it. Now you go and do it. So the students get up and they take something from the past that they just saw, and they're going to try to produce it in the future to get the same result. It's not a problem. It's okay. And you repeat that a lot, and your technique will get better for sure. But it's very much about the past and the future. So that's one of the that can be one of the problems of an overly technical orientation, that you're stuck in this field of time trying to repeat something rather than just dropping into the present moment. The only place you can find the principles is in the present moment. The only place I can't find the principles in the past. I can't, they do not exist in the past. Or they always existed in the present moment back then, and they will always exist in the present moment in the future, but they're here and now. So mindfulness, basic awareness, it's here and now or nothing. Centering, we can all just do, everybody just kind of find your, just check your center right now. It's just here and now, or it's nowhere. Posture, I mean, we're sitting down, but so, maybe you're relaxed or whatever, but if you think posture, okay. Relaxation, it's only here, it's here or now, here and now, or it's nowhere. And of course, connection. Listening, in this case, we're listening closely to each other and trying to get each other, kind of connecting. It only happens in the present moment. So that's something that I'm constantly orienting the students around. And we have very strong in our bodies, especially in martial arts, to want to control the situation, to control ourselves and control the other person. Control usually blocks it out. But we don't want to throw away control because, let's say that I'm training with somebody, the fear comes up. If I just go with the fear, then I can't, it's not Aikido. But if I give space, so the control would be, okay, what's the container to hold that fear? What's going to happen? The wave comes up. Okay, now I stay with it. The wave goes back down, and now I'm back in the center. And I didn't lose my center. That takes a little bit of control, but it's not the egoic kind of control over yourself or over another person. It's the control to stay present in the present moment. So the thing about the principles is that the important thing to understand about the principles is that they're universal. So this mindfulness that I just spoke about, it's not, uh, I like, I study Vipassana meditation. I studied with Sayadaw U Pandita. It's a Burmese style. It's a Mahasi school. Osan, you also practice a Burmese style, but it's a Goenka school or Uba King school. So they're different schools and our techniques are different. And believe me, I don't know if you know this, Osan,
Mhm.
but in Burma, they fight with each other, these guys. I'm not physically, but they don't like each other.
Yes.
The Mahasi guys say that the Goenka guys are all wrong. The Goenka guys say the Mahasi guys are all wrong. It's just like in Japan. The Aikikai guys don't like the Iwama guys. The Iwama guys don't like the Aikikai guy. They don't like these guys. They don't like those guys. It's human nature gets in there, right? That's what happens when there's too much focus on materiality and not
Mhm.
spirit or principles. So principles are universal, that they're accessible, experiential, and expressible at all times, in all places, for all people. Sorry, all times, all places, through all circumstances, for all people, meaning that for you, center for you, Osan, over there in Turkey, center for me over here, center for Diana in Florida. I don't know if they're still living in Florida, but center for Diana. It's the same center. Center for O Sensei before he died, and since 2,500 center for Buddha 2,500 years ago. It's the same center. If it's not the same center, it's not a principle. So for a principle to be a principle, it has to be universal. Now, when you and I start to organize our Aikido around principles and we touch the principles, center, connection, ground, blending,
Mhm.
then we're actually organizing around a spiritual state because your center and my center is the same center. That's where you and I are actually one. Your Kotegaeshi and my Kotegaeshi, because we come from different schools, they're not, they're different. They're
Yeah.
different. And it's okay. It's diversity. It's not bad, but they're different. But your center and my center, it's always the same. Your connection, my connection, it's the same connection. O Sensei's connection. It's the same connection. So to make a long story short, in Aikido, I think the spiritual doorway is always through the principles.
Mhm. Yes, Sensei. I'm not sure, but I thought you said that the techniques are separating us, but the principles are unite us. Actually.
Techniques divide and
Yes.
principles unite. Yeah, and division's not a problem. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
When we divide and become polarized, that's
Mhm.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well, it's just no a polarization. There's a lot of polarization in the world right now. In the Middle East, there's a lot of polarization in politics in Europe, in the States, and I'm sure Turkey. A lot of polarization. Polarization only leads to more conflict.
Mhm.
I mean, one might completely dominate and win completely, okay, but everybody there loses. So there's a lot of suffering there. Polarization generally just perpetuates the conflict, and that's not Aikido. The diversity of perspectives do not necessarily have to polarize. But for us not to polarize, then we have to do a lot of work with releasing our identifications, our
Mhm.
personal identifications. Doesn't mean I was born in Texas. So yeah, I'm Texan. If I have I could put my cowboy hat on again. I didn't grow up as a cowboy, but whatever. I can relate to being Texan, but that identity is long gone.
Mhm.
When I go back to Texas, I like it. I like to be a Texan, but that identity is long gone. Not from Buddhism, just from being not living in America for many, many, many years. But the Buddhist training and hopefully our Aikido training will also start to wear out, not wear out, wear down the ego in a way that our identities start to release and release and release.
Mhm.
So we steal American or Turkish, excuse me, or Turkish, or practice Aikikai, Aikido practice, ASU practice, whatever it is. We have these things, but they're in us. I'm not in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's it. Principles always there. And then I want to ask a basic questions. So,
Sure.
how one can like imagine I'm just a beginner in Aikido and meditation in the first place. How one can start practicing basic meditation
Well,
if there's no teacher? I always tell people you should join a 10-day Vipassana course. It's always hey,
that's a
I know
big
it's always
that's a
been
big jump. That's a big jump.
yes, but it's a big job. Yes, you're right. Is there a basic startup for new students?
Well, of course, is there basic startup? Well, yeah, basically, I mean, people they have to approach a teacher, approach teaching. It has to come from them. So
Mhm.
for some one reason or another, person maybe they listen to this talk or they've seen it, they're inspired in Aikido, and they want to learn more about meditation. So they've got to approach somebody. But that can be done on YouTube. I'm not saying you should find your teacher on YouTube, but that can be done on YouTube. There's so much Dharma, so much wonderful meditation
Mhm.
talks and stuff on YouTube. It can be done on Instagram, social media. You can find it all over the place. If you want to take meditation seriously, you want to take on a formal practice.
Mhm.
And taking on a formal practice means approaching a teacher in a particular tradition. And how you choose a tradition, I mean, I was always drawn to Buddhism, so of course I recommend Buddhism, but I was drawn to Buddhism as a non-Buddhist. It pulled me. So
Mhm.
that was my karma that I was drawn to Buddhism. Find something that speaks to you. It could be Sufi, it could be Christian, it could be Buddhist, it could be Hindu, whatever. There's so much. But whatever the case, if you want to really meditate seriously, if you want to commit to a more practice, then you should find a teacher or a community that can help you formalize the practice. Because these traditions, these meditative traditions that we're talking about, they're all thousands of years old.
Yes, sir.
And their methodologies are really, really solid. Some of these traditions are more religious. So some people want that. They're looking for more religion. Okay, great. Go for it. It was never interesting to me. I was never interested in that. I was interested in the mystical core. Some of them might be religious, but you can access the mystical core without taking on the baggage of the religion.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty these days. There's a lot, but I do recommend a formal training, and the reason is because you having a formal relationship with the teacher um, keeps you on track. You've got somebody there that's really, really supporting your karma, like the transformation of your karma, and meditation. I guess the most important reason is that meditation. There's so much that you can do, and so many ways you can go get lost, so to speak.
Mhm.
That having a teacher that just you can save so much time with a teacher just helps you to kind of find your way forward. And then once you've done that, if you find a place that's maybe a school that has a 1 day retreat, you go spend 7 hours doing meditation 1 day. Maybe they have a weekend, you go do a weekend. After 1 or 2 weekends, if you're inspired to do more, then you go on a 10-day retreat in the Goenka or Mahasi or whatever. There's so many wonderful 10-day retreats. And then, it just can go on from there. Now, for me, I was always committed to hardcore training. And the one reason I was committed to it was because I was able to. I didn't get married, I didn't get married when I was young, and I didn't have to do my father's career. I had okay money. I didn't have to take care of the house or take care of the family or take care of pets or anything like that. I was fortunate, Yeah, and many people have those things, and you should, if you have those things, keep them. I'm not saying
Mhm.
don't. I was just fortunate, so I could go away and do it full time. Now, at 61, I have two small kids, and we have a cat and a dog, and my wife and I have separated, but still, we're co-parenting, and I have a business and a nonprofit, and so my life is very, very full right now. Um,
Sensei, did you say 61?
61.
Nice.
Yeah.
You didn't look like it.
No, thank you. It's the meditation. It's the meditation, not the Aikido. I think Aikido can keep you young too if you don't drink too much. In Japan they drink a lot. And if you ever see an old Aikidoka that looks old, it's probably because they're drinking, not because they're training Aikido. If you see an old Aikidoka who doesn't drink, they usually look pretty young.
Yes,
Hi,
yes.
hi Diana, how you doing? It's good to see you.
Yep.
Just
Uh,
for the heck of just for the heck of it, I'm 78 now.
78. Oh my God.
really?
Wow. And Diana's been doing you don't I guess you don't do Aikido these days, right?
I haven't practiced formally for I don't know, 50 years, 40 years, something.
Oh my God. Okay.
Long
That's
time, long
amazing.
over 40 years, yeah.
Okay, but you still practice Aikido in principle.
Principles, always
Yeah,
principles.
that's amazing. That's great.
And
That's
I really
wonderful.
love what you said about centering, how one needs to be able to observe oneself in order to actually experience center. That's kind of a profound
Well,
statement.
but I mean, if
Mm,
you work with beginners, like in any method, doesn't matter if it's Aikido or whatever,
mm,
with embodiment, sorry, with embodiment, you just come to realize that most people, like I think, what was his name? Oscar Wilde, in one of his books, he wrote a line, Mr. Duffy lives a short distance from his body. That we're just
mm.
disembodied. We're not, the average person, modern man and woman, they're not so connected to their bodies. So in Aikido, we're helping them to kind of, learn. And that's universally speaking, that's awareness training. That's mindfulness training. Great. Anyways, Osan, you
Yeah.
wanted to, I think you maybe had one or two more questions.
Yeah, I just one more little questions, and ha you had a project named like,
Aikido Without Borders?
yes, Sensei, Aikido Without Borders. Can you talk about a little bit, because I think it's very important for the all of us now, this kind of projects or this kind of ideas for building a bigger community.
Well, I moved to Israel about 15 years ago, and at first I wasn't so like, why would I move to Israel? It's conflict, it's the Middle East, there's always these wars and bombs and stuff. It's just like, oh, why would I go there? And then I was invited to come here and teach at a certain point, and there was an intifada happening when I came, and that year all the teachers canceled their trips to Israel because buses were blowing up, and the conflict, and the West Bank was on fire, and the whole it's the same story. My God. Anyways, but I was very inspired. I went to the Holy City, Jerusalem, with a friend of mine. She took me kind of touring around, dear friend of mine. And I had been doing my meditation practice, and I had really been asking, what is a spiritual warrior?
Mm.
And because if you think about it, a spiritual warrior is a person who is you're bringing spirit and warrior together. Spiritual warrior. We know what a warrior is. We know what a spiritual person is. But what is it? How can they fit together? Because a warrior, and let's just assume it's a warrior for a good cause, like morally correct warrior, the samurai tradition. We're not being warriors and stealing stuff. We're being warriors and protecting others, whatever that means. So a warrior must be willing, if you take that idea all the way to its conclusion, a warrior must be willing to sacrifice their life. No, no,
Mm.
no, no, no. Excuse me. A warrior must be willing to, of course, they're willing to sacrifice their life, but a warrior must be willing to take another's life for the greater good. Because if you're really a warrior and you go to war, you may be confronted with having to kill somebody. Now, who knows? Maybe people here have already had to face that in their life. I don't know. I have not. But if you're a warrior, that's kind of your job, you know. The moment of truth, it could come to that you're face to face and you have to kill. All right, that's the warrior path. Japan made this whole beautiful thing around it. Spiritual path is opposite. Spiritual path is that in a moment of truth, if push comes to shove, you're willing to sacrifice your life for the greater good. You give your life for the greater good. Warrior is willing to take a life for greater good. That's why the soldiers were always soldiers, and the monks and nuns were always monks and nuns. You know, the old saying, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's." You know, Caesar was all about the governing and the politics, and the Pope was all about the religion or whatever it was. So, but a spiritual warrior, oh my God, think about it. Try to put your head there for a moment. How can you be 1000% both when there's such a contradiction? To try to truly, because in a moment of truth, what happens for most people is you're going to collapse into one. Okay, I'll kill. Oh, okay, I'll let you, I'll sacrifice my. But no, how can it be both? How? It's impossible. And yet, O Sensei did it. O Sensei was that. That was what O Sensei was. And also other, I'm sure, other great masters, men and women. So what's interesting about that is when you put this into a koan, how on earth can I be in spirit and material at the same time? It creates a tension. And if you manage to stay with that tension, you know, and with all the good warrior qualities, you know, face it, don't turn away from it, be honest about it, and all the good spiritual qualities, surrender, allow it in, accept it, and all that together, something will emerge. Now, what emerges is Aikido, and that whole thing is Aikido. Um, so coming to Israel, I was struck by that. You know, this is a koan I'd been carrying my whole life, whatever my adult life, and I was struck by what was happening here because it was so obviously, downward spiral. And then I went to the old city with my friend Judith. She took me when I first came here, and it was a tour. And we went to the Wailing Wall, which is the holiest site in Judaism. And oh, okay, great. You know, and again, I'm not religious, but it's like, you know, a spiritual place. I love spiritual places. So we're going to the Wailing Wall. And as we're coming down the steps to get to the big plaza, there was a security station set up. And you had to go through a metal detector. At that time, pizzerias were blowing up. So, okay, so we're going through the metal detector. There's a man with his family in front, a religious guy, you know, the guy that wears the black, and he had a kippah, a yarmulke, a kippah on. And his family went through. He took out his keys, put them in the box, took out his phone, took out his gun, goes through, puts everything back on, and goes down and prays. And I was just like, you know, disorganized. It's like, you know, what is this? What is this? What is this? You know, how can we be completely spiritual and at the same time be a warrior without going into, because a spiritual warrior could go to a holy war, you know. I mean, our whole history is like that. But that's not what Osensei was about. This is the Aikido path. So that's what inspired me. And I was coming to Israel yearly on during those years that I was meditating. And then I kind of through, I won't go into the whole story, but in the end I decided to give it a try to live here because you know I actually like it here. Well, these days, this last year has been really, really hard, but I like this place. But I know I wouldn't live here unless I was doing something for peace. So within weeks, I started teaching Aikido, and first it was in East Jerusalem to a Palestinian group, and then I started going into the West Bank, and then we created an organization called Aikido Without Borders, where I was going regularly to the West Bank for 8 years, and just in the end, it was a piecework to bring Israelis and Palestinians together, and over time, it really became a Palestinian support group where I was just going in and supporting these guys. And to this day, they're still there. You know, 15 years later, they're still practicing. If you look for their page on Facebook, it's the Aikido Palestinian Aikido Organization Facebook page. You can just see their activities. And I'm so proud. I mean, you look at them and it looks like they look like they're doing Aikido, Aikikai Aikido, classic Aikido. You know, when I went over the first time, they were doing Aikido, but it was a mess. They didn't really have teachers. They didn't, it was not organized. They didn't have the Japanese culture so much installed, and now and there's so many kids practicing Aikido, and it's just a beautiful thing. So I stopped going over there about 8 years ago, and now I just support them from here. I helped them getting their ranks through the Aikikai, and this year we're going to get them official recognition from Hombu Dojo in Japan, so they'll have their own organization. And yeah, so that's it. So in the end, and the way it is now here in Israel with this horrible war,
Yes, yes, yes.
there's just separation. This is not a time to try to do piecework.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon we'll be able to get back that. I shouldn't say that because there are people doing that still here, but they're small groups, and it's a war.
Yeah.
Horrible war, I should say.
Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
very. uh, So we are coming to end of our time. I want to ask the other people if you have some questions to join the talk, please come now. You can join with your questions.
I'm gonna get some water. Well, it's
Yes, that's it, please.
I
Uh,
have well, not a question, comment. I've been, doing Aikido for some years now, and I've attended many seminars with many great senseis. And I have to tell, like, many great senseis were teaching a lot of nice things, good things. But only in Miles Sensei's seminars, I actually could practice the principles he was talking about. I never ran into this kind of instruction in any other seminars. Maybe there are.
you also
So
studied with Patrick, right? You also came to Patrick's
yeah, yeah,
classes.
at Patrick maybe.
Patrick's very good at this as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
Patrick
yeah.
and
I
I
mean,
we teach together that way.
yeah. Let's say only both of you. Let's say
Yeah, yeah.
seminars. It was. I just have to say that it was life changing for me. In one seminar, we practiced the principle that my sensei just said, that if you are in a conflict, instead of trying to get away from it, or having being wanting it to be over, whatever, if you can stay there centered without losing your center, and wait patiently without deciding or asking for a defined resolution like the way you want.
Control, basically.
Yeah, control. But if you stay there patiently, the situation is going to change by itself to something else, let's say. And hopefully, a more, it may not be best for you personally, but in general, to a better state. And this was life-changing for me because I practiced it in Aikido mat, and then I realized, hey, in my whole life, that's the same story. And I can apply the same principles in my work, at home, in the family, everything.
yeah.
Well, Morris, I think it's also what we're talking about is the principle of the basically life force. That it's a positive thing, even in the darkest times. Like right now in the Middle East, it's a dark time and it's a lot of destruction. It doesn't look like it's going to let up anytime soon. But it's so much easier to polarize. It is so much easier to polarize because all that pain, you can cover it up, then you just blame everything over there. It's so much easier, but we know where that goes. But Aikido teaches us no, not to polarize, not to blame, not to center and ground, open up, allow a situation, and then connect. Now, often we realize why that's so difficult because doing that is not easy and it's unpleasant and it's frustrating. But if we can somehow stay with, and you say it's not, you say it changes and not always good for the self. I think if both are alive and engaged, the result is always life affirming for everybody, for everybody. But it's a very, very hard thing for humans to do, to stay grounded, centered, and aware enough to where all my reactivity comes up and to not let it jump out of my mouth or move through my hands, to just give it space. It comes up and it goes away. Then we're back in connection. Then resolution is always it's almost it's like a miracle. It's always spontaneous. That's what O Sensei was always talking about. And anyways, thanks for the plug that I would see. I'm happy that you got that experience. Like I said, Patrick Cassidy does that. There's a lot of teachers there. Jan Nivelis is like that. Bob Nadeau Sensei is like that. There's a lot of teachers who are teaching principles-based approaches, and they have really good technical skills as well because they put in their time training.
It sounds like Goenkaji said anicca. Everything changed.
Anicca. Well, there you go. I mean, now if we just shift to Vipassana, I mean, the word Dhamma. No, we can. The word Dhamma, it's completely related. Dharma or Dhamma, it means ultimate reality. What is the ultimate reality? It's the three universal characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, at least in Buddhism, at least in this mindfulness meditation. When you start to contemplate these principles it's like the code of the matrix. You start to see it directly, your world changes. Everything changes.
Yes,
So Mitten said, he wrote a question here, and then I can take another question. Does Miles have any experience with ki meditation or ki breathing from Ki Aikido Koichi Tohei school? You know, I got my black belt in a ki Aikido school. It was called Seidokan. It used to be part of this ki society before I joined Aikido, and then after I joined, or before I joined, they broke away. But they were still doing all the ki exercises, and I did a lot of them. I was 22. I didn't really understand them. My experience was very few people understood them. They understood the movements and everything. I tell you, I said before that I was more drawn to Buddhism just naturally. And ki is phenomena, for sure. It's energy. You can call it breath, principle, whatever. It's phenomena. But ki is also conditioned phenomena. Ki is also impermanent. It's also unsatisfying because it's impermanent. You can't hold on to it. It's unsatisfying. There's no ultimate satisfaction to be had there, and it's ultimately empty. So I think the ki style of Aikido is good, and I think the breathing. It's not my cup of tea, but it's very, like I said, I got my black belt in it. And it's good style. It's good Aikido. It's certainly healthy. It's certainly great relationally. But I think you can go beyond it. I think emptiness is there's one step further. And O Sensei did say, if you really want to understand Aiki, you must first understand emptiness.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Is that you, Mitten?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you
Thank
practicing a ki style of Aikido?
Not actually, but I would like to ask the meditation practice of it. I mean, trying to emphasize, have you ever benefited from that? The meditation practice of Ki Aikido.
Well, when I practiced it, Mitten, is it Mitten?
Yes, sir. Metin.
When I practiced it, I was 22 to 25, and I didn't really understand it, so I can't say I did. But I know that in the practicing meditation many years later, I came to understand what it meant. So there's Morris, and probably Osan knows that at a certain point in your meditation practice, even in Vipassana practice, tremendous amount of energy can be released and flowing through the body, and it's quite strong. It's called PT, or it's called PT it means energetic joy, and it's the same thing that we're talking about in Ki. It's also, some people speak about it as Kundalini, and incredibly powerful. But it's a station. Now, as you pass through that station, it's still with you, but in a much more refined way. But it's like everything else; it's all subject to emptiness, so it all disappears at some point, and then it comes back.
So, any more questions? When you're talking, Sensei, there's lots of things coming to my mind, but I think there's lots of things to talk about it in practice, in meditation, in Dhamma, in Aikido. They are all going together. They all can be practicing together. But maybe Aikido without borders still is a good idea to maybe not there now for now, but in the other countries. I really dreamed about it, and we can invite you in Turkey, and we can practice about meditation and Aikido together.
I would love to do that. That sounds great. Yeah. And by the way, the Aikido Belt Without Borders, I haven't seen my students for, well, I saw one recently, but I haven't been over to the West Bank for this whole year since the war started, but I'm in contact with them regularly. And in fact, they just got their ranks recently, and and they came. One of them who has an Israeli passport, he came over here, and so we're still in contact. We're still doing Aikido Without Borders, just not physically. And yeah, so it certainly would be much easier to do Aikido Without Borders, maybe in other parts of the world right now.
Yeah, and this meeting also can be part of it. I feel like this. I mean, that's why I want to continue this kind of meetings with you and with other great teachers. So there is lots of idea to we have to hear these ideas. I think what you talk about it's the I think best definition of Aikido, which I heard. And so we are coming to the end of our time.
Well, can I say one thing before we
Yeah,
finish up?
of course.
I have I'm not teaching it these days, but I did teach for many years an online meditation course called Meditation for Aikidoka.
Mhm.
And the reason I mention it is because it's designed specifically for Aikidoka, and we use these Japanese Zen terms. Shoshin is beginner's mind, and then the next phase of the practice is Zanshin, sustained awareness. The next phase of the practice is Mushin, and then Fudoshin, and then Takimuso Aiki. It's like 8 stages of practice. And of course, I'm teaching basically mindfulness meditation plus a little bit of non-dual meditation. But it's a very something, practicing meditation in Aikido is something that can be grasped. It's not so difficult.
Is that training still reachable on
Yeah,
your?
you can do it. People can do it by themselves. They can find it on my website, and just it's like a self-paced course now. But I
Mhm.
haven't taught it for a couple of years, and I'm not so sure I'm going to be doing it anytime soon. But
Mhm.
but if you want to do something, if you have a group of people in Turkey who are interested in it, we could definitely find a way to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds good.
No, it's a perfect, I tell you, for somebody who's doing Aikido that wants to get started with meditation, it's a 2-month program. We meet every week, once a week, and then during the week they practice. It's a great way to get started.
Maybe we can talk about it later.
That'd be fine. Yeah, I'd love it.
That's I really want to do. I really want to do it.
I think that's how I met Morris the first time, right? Was through that program?
Yes, that's how I started
That's
meditation with you.
and then I met you physically after that, right?
No, I actually came to your Dead Sea seminar first,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that I still remember. I loved your Aikido, and you invited me to the seminar. And at the
You
end
were
of the
doing,
se
you'd been doing Qigong,
yeah, some but very simple way.
right? But
And
you had
then
some awareness practice.
yeah, but at the end of the seminar, I asked you, Sensei, I don't have time, possibility to come practice with you the Aikido. But how can I develop my Aikido? And you told me you want to develop your Aikido, you got to start meditation.
Did I
And
really?
that's how I started the courses with you.
That's great.
Right.
Well, okay, so if you guys ever want to set it up again, if you ever want to do something like that, I'd be happy to set it up again. It's a wonderful course. There's probably been about 500 people go through that course.
Mhm.
So it's really nice.
I think so, Sensei. I think it can be the next project or next meeting, because I think especially in Turkey, all the Aikido community needs it. Sometimes
Well,
we even didn't use this kind of words, so Shoshin, Fudoshin, Zanshin. We are getting lost these ideas.
there's what people need and then there's what people want.
Yes.
That's not always the same. So when somebody wants something, but they don't need it, or no, when somebody needs something, but they don't want it, the best we can do is we can plant seeds, and then maybe they come to that. Nobody forced me to meditate. It came from me natural. and I'm sure all of us here. And that's tends to work the best.
So thank you very much, Sensei, to
And my pleasure. Yeah.
join us tonight. Before we finish this, I thank all of you to join us. I want to continue this kind of meetings with other teachers and maybe Miles Sensei again. Please follow Empty Mirror magazine, and we can make a contact through Empty Mirror magazine. This is the name of my website. So if we don't have any questions,
Can you put that in the chat? I couldn't quite understand the name of your website.
I think it's in Turkish, no?
no,
Oh, is it in Turkish?
It's also in English?
Actually in Turkish it's boş ayna,
Oh, okay.
and boş ayna means empty mirror. Of course, it's a Turkish website.
So it's not in English.
Sorry, it's not in English, it's Turkish website.
Okay.
But I'm trying to do something like this in Turkish.
You can use Google Translate. It's so easy. Click, you get the whole thing in English.
So again, thank you very much, Sensei.
Thank you.
And
I wish you all a great practice in both meditation and Aikido.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. It's wonderful to connect everybody. And
if you want to add something.
No, that's okay.
I want to add just one thing, Miles. When you taught on Siesta Beach around a tree on our beach, I want you to know that the tree is still standing. Many of our trees are no longer standing. We were just hit by 2 major hurricanes. My house was completely flooded.
Oh, geez, sorry to hear that.
But
Diane's living in Florida, and they had 2 massive hurricanes go through there in 6 weeks or 3 weeks or something.
Well, actually, yeah, like 10 days apart, 2 weeks apart, the 2 hurricanes, yeah. But that tree where you taught, we were all very happy that tree is still standing.
Well, it's good to see you, man. And Bosan, thank you so much for the invitation, or Osan, and I look forward to meeting you in person someday.
Me too, Sensei. You're welcome, and thank you. So good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.